The original premise of Agile was Agile isn't going to solve any of your problems. What it was going to do is expose where your problems are quicker than any other way, and then ask you the question, and now what do you want to do about it? Executives and leaders were saying, I want a promise up front that you're going to make a 10% saving on productivity, that you're going to come in and everything will be seamless. I want a playbook so that all I have to do is follow it. And that type of request was one of not only control, but to some levels a degree of distance. The custodianship of agility should lie with leaders. And you can't outsource that. And seeking perfection or prescription without the duty of care of tending will always leave the poor out. And we built Agile on bad habits, sometimes made them worse, or we created promises that we couldn't keep.
Please give me a minute of your time. If analytics are to be believed, you're more likely to be a listener than a subscriber. No, this isn't a plea for your money, but it is a plea for your support, which can be free. The good news is you're already doing the hard part by taking the time to listen to conversations that are consequential. This show is still being built episode by episode, guest by guest, and your subscription and feedback helps me to determine who to invite, what to ask, so we can ensure that we deliver the most consequential content to you possible. So please, take a moment to subscribe on your platform of choice. Thank you for listening. Now, let's get on with the show. Martin Kearns is an enterprise agility advisor, executive coach, and longtime practitioner of the Agile movement. Someone who has spent much of his career helping organizations rethink how work is structured, how decisions are made, and how teams are trusted to deliver results. He was among the earliest generation of Scrum coaches, recognized by the Scrum Alliance as one of the first 3 individuals in the world to hold that certification. That early vantage point matters. It means Martin has not only watched the Agile movement spread through corporations and government departments, he's participated in its formation, teaching and coaching organizations across more than 20 countries as they attempt to translate its principles into everyday practice. For nearly 2 decades, he's worked with leaders attempting the same difficult task, changing how organizations coordinate complicated work. His approach has always been grounded in a deceptively simple premise, that transformation begins with people. Customers, teams, and markets first. Technology and processes as enablers rather than masters. Yet the very ideas that once promised liberation inside organizations, self-organization, empowered teams, iterative learning, have in many places hardened into ritual. Stand-ups, sprint cycles, velocity charts, and dashboards are now ubiquitous across the corporate landscape. The language of autonomy has spread widely. Whether autonomy itself has spread quite as far is a more interesting question. Martin has spent enough time inside organisations to recognise the difference between genuine empowerment and carefully managed theatre, and that experience gives him a distinctive vantage point from which to assess where the Agile movement now stands, what it achieved, where it went astray, and why many organisations appear to be entering what might politely be called the trough of disillusionment. Today's conversation is not a technical tutorial on Agile methods. It's a more fundamental inquiry into the nature of work, how much autonomy professionals should have, how much control leaders inevitably seek, and why systems designed to liberate judgment sometimes end up constraining it. Martin Kearns, welcome to On the Subject of Leadership.
Thanks, Robert. Lovely intro. I might some time. Thanks.
Not at all.
Just so you know, I was one of the first 3 enterprise coaches in the Scrum Alliance, not Scrum Master.
Oh, okay.
But it was still pretty early on in the days.
I was about to say, I think it's definitely talking to the depth and breadth of your experience.
Yeah. But it was the enterprise coaching where I really kind of decided to put a lot of emphasis from the very beginning, because I thought, if you don't get the larger system right, a lot of the training material goes to waste. So I realized, especially as a consultant trying to do things, that, yes, you could have a harmonious squad, quite dysfunctional inside of an organization that hasn't valued its work.
And I think that sort of does lead into the promise versus the reality and the delivery, because I think often the nature of frameworks is they're invariably brought in by senior individuals within an organization who might not have to practice it on a regular basis, but they see it as probably silver bullet's the wrong word, but certainly as a bit of a cure-all.
Yeah. Look, the original premise of Agile was Agile isn't going to solve any of your problems. What it was going to do is expose where your problems are quicker than any other way, and then ask you the question, and now what do you want to do about it?
Yeah.
Executives and leaders were saying, I want a promise up front that you're going to make a 10% saving on productivity, that you're going to come in and everything will be seamless. I want a playbook so that all I have to do is follow it. And that type of request was one of not only control, but to some levels, a degree of distance. I'm leaving, that's on you. You go and do something. Whereas really, custodianship of agility should lie with leaders. And now you can't outsource that. And seeking perfection or prescription without the duty of care of tending will always lead to poor outcomes. And I think our industry overly promised, and if you think about the branding of safe, you use safe, we'll keep your investment safe, everything's safe. And, if you look at the material of safe, it's actually quite verbose, and that's seen as a strength, a body of knowledge. It didn't necessarily lead to the role and responsibility of adaptation, because adaptation is part of a listening process. And most organizations really struggled with the belief system of impediments. So an empirical process that was meant to be agile was based off error. And there's many rooms I've been in where I was told raising error is not acceptable, whereas it's essential to adaptation. So either we built agile on bad habits, sometimes made them worse, or we created promises that we couldn't keep, and now the critique is to agile as a philosophy, even though it's the foundations of its introduction were wrong. One of the things I find a little bit weird with this is I'm a bit I don't use the word agile as much in my work. I try to live it than speak to it. A lot of people tell me, I know agile, and when they say that, they refer to the previous organization they worked in and their way of operating. That is not agile. That's a way of working in one organization. It's the same logic as how can a Spotify model that worked for a startup streaming application support a bank. Also within the culture of Dutch, where guilds have strong meaning. Guilds don't have any meaning to the same extent in Australia that I've seen. So it's anything cross-cultural. So I feel that there's been a bit of a failing on us to try and be able to keep to the fundamental premise that all I can give you is an empirical process that's based off error, and your willingness to resolve them or live with them. Because sometimes we have to accept a constraint. But there's. If you were truly agile, I'll probably use this the last time. You adapt to solve the problem. You don't reframe the problem to suit your way of working. I think that got lost along the way.
Yeah, and I think that is so accurate. I mean, one of the things we were talking about just before we started recording was the notion of sort of doubt versus certainty. And I think that there is that push. I mean, I know whenever I'm in a senior management meeting, I'm consistently pressed for what's your confidence, what's your confidence, what's your confidence. And in time, when you get that question enough, it almost forces you into this, I need to exert certainty as much as I can. And I think that definitely sees people drawing the frameworks for Agile into, okay, we want to leverage it to create greater certainty in the project. And I think sort of the iterations sometimes help that principle, but just not that practice, because often the work that we do is inherently uncertain because we have teams that are making assumptions about interdependencies, about other teams, about the work they do. And to your point, even if you bring together a group of people who quote unquote know Agile, it's often very highly contextual, either for the organization or the culture they're in, versus how it's a living framework that'll evolve as the team grows.
Yeah, I mean, if you take, I mean, there's, part of this is the pressure of trying to distance yourself from a shared outcome to hold someone accountable to it and turn to some form of financial transaction, right? They call it a contract. It doesn't have to be that way. If there is many other ways of looking at this. A strategic partnership, a joint venture. There's lots of ways that we can look at uncertainty in different ways than prescribe and promise up front. Because one of the other things is then that you keep loading, buffers of spend so that you can kind of protect yourself, and ends up becoming an adversarial relationship than a reciprocal one. When I look at strategy and any strategy paper, and then I look at the way the business operates and the way the business prioritizes, the business strategy is usually only a less than half percentage of focus. There's all the things you've inherited from last year. There's also the new shiny thing that has happened that wasn't in the offsite, I don't know, in the Dandenong Mountains last Christmas.
Yeah.
And our competitors are already jumping on us. So if we don't, we're going to lose out. So what's more important, responding to a competitor or sticking to the promise that you made in the Dandenong Mountains? So there's already plenty of examples and proof points to show that their certainty is a false promise. And then it's about, okay, well, what do we need to have instead? And I think there's a great word for it, and I think it's called resilience. Every form of resilience is based off a feedback mechanism, and that's really all the iteration was trying to do, was to force a double loop learning, force the understanding of the system into the outcome. Because in the end, the system is, as Deming said, 97% of the problem.
Yeah. And I think that is so interesting once you bring the strategy piece into play, because so often they are done at offsites and it becomes almost a bit like the company's vision, that sort of very loose document, if it's produced at all, that sort of sits there and then it almost never even hits the team level. I mean, the number of businesses I've been into where I've spoken to team members, they've never seen the company strategy. You talk to an executive, they insist that there is one, but it's how is that then being brought down to the teams, and then how are they enabling that in their daily routines and practice?
Well, it's the dilution of purpose. It's the dilution of priority. There's also another part, which is the groundswell of reality. I'm pretty sure in the strategy conversation where we're trying to envision the future, it's very rare you would talk about technical debt. The debt that's in our company that will create an additional cost on strategy, because who would want to talk about debt in an environment that's meant to be creative, innovative, and hopeful? So there's a balance to be had in organizations around the aspiration of the organization. How does that aspiration line to our current capability, and fixing that gap? But at the same time as, we still need to have a cash flow. We still need to be regulatory compliant. And like, they're not things that become part of a strategy. And as a result, balance is important. And that was the idea then of the quarterly increment of an OKR.
Yeah.
The fortnightly or 3-week period of a sprint was to kind of allow for recalibration to happen, because it has to be the bigger habit. Recalibration should be far more habitual than direction.
And I think that is particularly interesting as you, I guess, lift us up into that OKR space, those sort of longer time increments, and the inability of organisations to talk debt, thinking on technical projects, particularly the tech debt that tends to emerge. There is always that need for, but that sort of yesterday's news, can't we just keep iterating for a better tomorrow? And I think sometimes that principle does work, but in other organizations, there's, in a sense, too much structural debt in the system, and the iterations just become further band-aids rather than actually a recalibration process, bringing us more back to that mean.
Agreed. I think where we've lost our agility will be down to sometimes I think the one that's holding us back the most at the moment would be the overspend during COVID, or the inflation of operational costs inside of COVID, and now we're trying to recover or recoup. And there's that shrinking of the organization with a promise that AI is going to solve everything, has strangled agility in some extent. I look at I look at the current attraction of AI. AI is great. I started using AI 12 years ago. My first true AI delivery with deep learning was 8 years ago. So I was already sold. So I'm not jumping in on a bandwagon. But you know what? For every AI experiment I've ran, I reckon about 65% of them fail. And I just don't see all of these kind of restructures and adoptions of AI is already with upfront promises of operational savings. And I'm worried that we've just created a new bubble. There's an argument that the only reason why the US isn't in recession is because the level of investment in AI has saved it.
Yeah.
There's also there's certain organizations that are AI specialists whose valuation after being in existence for 2 or 3 years is in the tens of millions, without really a balance sheet or a history of sales to support. So and so like when we look at something like AI and its promises with high rates of failure and adaptation required, you can kind of see how we're even shrinking our agility. Whereas the best way to get the most out of AI is to be continuously adaptive. I mean, that was the main reason for product and A/B testing, was to allow for that. As AI is becoming a bit more mainstream, I'm already starting to see I can save you 200, or I can save you 20% of your operational costs within the first 8 months. If you look at YouTube, there's those AI ads that says that after 2 weeks, I'll put you in the top 10 percentile of everybody, and after months you'll be invincible. That type of messaging is coming from somewhere.
Yeah.
And someone's attracted to it.
Oh, and I think it's, going back to your point, it's the heavy investment that's gone into it. It's that old axiom, I mean, I think we saw it back in the GFC with the idea of financial institutions that were deemed too big to fail. So someone's got to bail them out. And there's almost this thing sort of with AI. It's just so much investment is going into it. It can't be left to fail. Therefore, more money is then thrown into it. And it then just becomes this real sink. And in some cases, is almost trying to solve for some of the problems that it created itself.
And there's an optimism bias, right? Because a lot, like I said, there's when I've ran, kind of like a lean startup pilot in AI for an organization, the success rate from going from pilot to scale is about 20%.
Yeah.
It's not to say that the 80 are wrong and should be thrown in the bin. It's they weren't fit for purpose as is. Now, can they be repurposed, adapted to suit and maybe tailor down its original promise? Sure, like it's not to say that it's all wasteful and you can do something with the learning, but like for someone who just wants certainty, a 20% return isn't a great one.
No, it's not, and the scaling is so often the trouble. The POCs work wonderfully, and so long as the user base is small enough, the context of the model is simple enough, you can get those easy wins. And I think it's the speed of transformation that people are expecting from it. They imagine it will sort of be quite linear, when in reality you'll get a small spike, but then you'll certainly hit a plateau. And it's how do you as an organization move from plateau to next transformation?
There's also the other problem, though, is that unless it's just pure automation, anything in the generative AI space, there's always risk of drift.
Yeah.
And there's always risk of hallucination. And they're, to some extent, they're somewhat inevitable. But I don't think we're always putting in the checks and balances for the level of monitoring with Gen AI and that is necessary to gain the benefit of it. So there's, and I'm not really wanting to turn this into an AI discussion because I'm not really my, I've got experience, but it's definitely not my expertise. It was just showing how, if you consider AI in its current state and its level of evolution, where organizations probably need their greatest level of agility, what we're hearing is absolute promises of cost savings to win work. And I don't see the degrees of adoption to gain from that investment being institutionalized.
Yeah. No, I think that's I definitely think that's so true. And then I think it starts to almost become that sunk cost fallacy because we've invested so much in AI, it hasn't achieved that transformation. But that's now, all of the teams that we restructured. I mean, I think it was about a year ago when Microsoft were undergoing, I think maybe Google as well, vast layoffs. Now, it wasn't because the companies were struggling financially and couldn't afford to pay the bills. It was just they wanted to free up the capital and bring in different capability sets to really drive the AI trend. And then as an organization, you're being increasingly skewed to a capability set that what is their expertise? It is AI. So you will then start to, as they always say, every man with a hammer, is looking for the nail. It's the same sort of thing. You'll be looking for AI solutions to the problems rather than going, is it a workflow problem? Is it a management problem? Is it a interpersonal dynamics issue? What's hampering us?
And I mean, I think that's the beauty of complexity. Like, I say one of my favorite lines is, I never felt freer than when I admitted something's a complex problem, because it allowed me to be consciously incompetent. Because when I said something's complex, I've admitted to myself and to others that I don't know the answer. I think I have the skills and the discipline to find answers in time. But when something's complex in nature and saying, I don't know the answer right now, frees me to listen, to inquire, to test, and to be brave, to be humble. And I'm hearing a lot of people saying this problem's simple, go and fix it. If it was simple, it would already be fixed. I think there's an I mean, I worked with one organization where one of its strategic goals was to keep it simple. Good luck when you're facing a complex problem.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And you see that so much in teams. I mean, we always end up with what impact or what outcome are we trying to achieve from the project or product? And you notice it's always the simple stuff that gets sort of knocked off first. And then it's once you start to dig down into the complex problems, that's where the teams often start to jam up a little bit.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think for me, teams have to be conscious of if that's their risk appetite to defer the hard stuff in order to do the easy stuff. Well, then, as long as you're transparent and let everybody know about it, well, then that's not an issue. It's when that risk is hidden through progress.
Yeah.
And where that risk is hidden in transparency with a hope that we'll have it fixed by the time it gets to them. That's when your issues start. So I don't have a problem with starting with easy stuff, get some quick wins, and then tackle the hard thing, as long as that's a shared appetite of risk.
Yeah. And I think that I think talking about it as a risk, I think is so appropriate, because I've even seen, in the most egregious examples, teams that I think fundamentally know they can't solve something, but it's if we leave it close enough to go live, the organization will be committed and they'll actually rule that functionality out. And then we almost get away with never having to do it. But as you say, if it was a risk that was discussed, do we have a mitigation, and do we want to carry that risk as an organization? Because maybe that's essential to business productivity, to the best interests of the business, versus a manager's immediate need to get a product live or to just get through a board report, and then how they, in a sense, subsume or sort of cover over those risks when they're not effectively raised by the teams.
That's right. I agree with that, Robert. That's my take on it. And we have to realize with a lot of things in our workspaces that the answer is never obvious. Because if it was obvious, it would probably have already been automated or outsourced. So knowledge work, as Takahashi and Anaka have placed around it, is there's an aspect of creation, and it's one of the things I wonder, like, how creative am I every day? Like, what am I doing today was different to yesterday? When I go in and pitch a new proposal, how much of it is actually novel and unique to the situation? And I was having a bit of a joke with one of my mates, and who works with me, and we were diligently putting a proposal together, and 25 slides, a lot of detail, trying to get the balance between promise and uncertainty. And and as we're going through the slides, I was like, oh, geez, I hope we don't have to do this again. Hopefully we'll be able to reuse a lot of what we've done. And we kind of laughed at one another, went, we've said that every freaking time. And it still hasn't happened. And then we went and, kind of spoke a bit more. We both admitted to ourselves, well, it's not a surprise when what we do is knowledge work, right? We're trying to solve problems that organizations couldn't solve on their own and are looking for some external stimulus, capability or facilitation. So, yeah, it'll never be that way. So I think if it is, I'm probably in the wrong business, because as a strategic advisor and consultant, especially around enterprise agility, there has to be something new. There has to be newness. In my presentation year on year.
Yeah.
It's the reason why I read. It's the reason why I always have an imposter syndrome as I start a proposal. Am I the right guy? I just think I've allowed the imposter syndrome to turn into positive energy rather than self-doubt. sometimes I'll overly procrastinate and only start writing at the very last minute.
Yeah.
And don't know if that's always the best thing to be doing. There's this inherent nature I have in how I think that I just don't know. So maybe if I just read something else, or maybe if I ask somebody else, I might find out. And I've just tried to turn that into a bit of a superpower. And because I truly believe I'll give you an example. I've seen a lot of people use the word discovery these days.
Yeah.
And I would say over half the people, when they say discovery, they've just basically replaced the word business analysis with discovery and as the exact same thing. Whereas, I truly feel discovery is going down the rabbit hole, Alice in Wonderland, and having that sense of curiosity, wonder, depth, fear, and a desire to generate a new experience to be better informed. That's what really discovery is about. And if I have a discovery framework, and I have to be so careful that I don't turn that into a discovery playbook. Otherwise, I'll sense make every problem, and I'll try and create a customer journey map every single time. And that's not what discovery is. So, there was a book that I read. And I'm rambling a little bit, but there was a book I read that made a big difference for me, which was The Path of Least Resistance, and basically said that whatever way that the way that any organization works, it has been because it's worked within the path of least resistance. So if you're going to try and change an organization, of course they're going to be resistant because they've gone down the easiest path. So you have to refrain to a problem or to a challenge, because that's where the new path needs to go. It's to face into something rather than apply the same problem to the current way of working. So, appreciating that we already, as best we can, work toward paths of least resistance requires a reframing, and first, agility can come afterwards.
And I do really love that reframing of imposter syndrome, because it's certainly it's a phenomenon that I think exists a lot. And interestingly, most of the people that I know that suffer from true imposter syndrome versus they are actually just imposters, but they're naming it as a syndrome, are actually from the more inquisitive people, the people who do read voraciously. And it's always that axiom: I've read enough to know that I'm not an expert, but in reading that much, I then am that much further beyond everyone else who's often claiming they're experts because they haven't even done the reasoning. They're, the Kruger-Dunning effect, they're at the top of Mount Stupid, but they can't see it. So their confidence in their expertise and their knowledge and their certainty is just unyielding.
Yes.
And yet they're the ones that, for me, whenever I'm on a project with someone with that hyper level of certainty, it just makes me nervous, because I want to see that slight bit of doubt. I want to see that I think this is the solution, but I'm going to keep stress testing this as I'm going along. I'm not just going to book it and move on because I know best. That always worries me in a team.
Well, I mean, if we bring that to a team context, I want to have a warrior, and I want to have someone who wants to keep it simple, and I want to have someone who's chasing what I call CV-driven development, just trying to find a way to do something to help their CV. Because it's that level of diversity which makes a team intelligent.
Yeah.
Diversity is an important aspect to social intelligence. And I don't need a team of me. In fact, I think it would be a very bad thing. I need complementary skills so that someone else can get frustrated with me and say, enough procrastination, let's get on with it. And with somebody else who says, are we rushing to conclusions? I think that's the facilitated conversations that every team need to have. And as a result, the role of facilitation should be valued more. I think I've got a great facilitation course, but man, it's hard to sell. And I assume that facilitation would be the one core skill that's all organizations desire, but it's not really, it doesn't work that way. But
No, I think I think also there is that coming back to being an actual imposter versus having imposter syndrome. I think, yeah, for facilitation, there's almost that fear. I think it's why so many managers don't ask for management training. They get appointed and they want to look competent in the role. So they don't want to put up their hand and go, actually, no one's shown me how to manage a team. I'm kind of guessing. Could I get some training in that? And facilitation is obviously a key component in that. And I think there's that fear that, but the reason I am the manager, or as they tend to be called in organizations, I'm the leader, is because I can facilitate, I can chair the meeting, I can run things. But really they lack the competencies and skills to do it properly.
That's right. And when I do my facilitation training, the first and most important thing to do is to ensure there's a heightened level of self-awareness.
Yeah.
Because the person who you prefer to be, the persona that you like to live by, that aligns to your values most, might be the one that's necessary in a room. Maybe you are very goal-oriented, and this facilitation requires greater nurture. So, the best facilitators can take on a different persona to suit the need of the people, and I think that's just so important to get right. Which rather than just rush from one meeting to another and assume it's the same type of behavior that's required of you. And the only way really you can do that is by asking, who am I? And in this room, who do I need to be? And if you don't want to be that person, don't facilitate.
Yeah. And I think that is something that's so lacking in the people that, because of their positional authority in the organization, just take on the facilitator role. Their seniority means they have a slight luxury to just be themselves in every setting. And if people are bothered by it, they can find the door, which is the complete antithesis of what you need to be as a really capable facilitator.
Yeah. And time is, having time to think is so important to any executive. And, there's no position of power or position of importance because my calendar's full.
Yeah. So true.
If you don't have that space to reflect and be aware, there's a risk that you're working off bad habits, and they don't necessarily, actually, they might be all bad. You're working off habits, but as a result, that when they are bad, you're not checking in on yourself.
Yeah.
And I think it's such a strong discipline, and I don't believe it should be degraded to, well, do that when you're driving home from car on your commute, home in your car on the commute, or that's what the weekends are for. I do think in every work day in the workplace that you should have time where you're not busy, so that you're setting aside time to really do focus work. And sometimes that focus work requires some level of reflection and like I said, recalibration.
Yeah. And as knowledge workers, people should be engaged in critical thinking to greater or lesser extents. And if your day is packed, as you point out, it's almost more muscle memory, it's more reflective, it's more behavioral, what I've almost have been habituated to respond, and that then becomes my response rather than critically thinking about what's in front of me.
Yeah, you're basically trying to fulfill your role through your subconsciousness.
Yeah.
And and that again is where I think agility has its place, because it gives you the opportunity to stop, gain feedback. Feedback is only as good as your ability to listen to it. So things important. Processing what's been said, make an informed decision what to do next. I think that's that was the whole beauty of what we were trying to learn as technology evolved. And you just have to look at when the power of a PC 25 years ago when Agile was invented to the power of computation or computers now, computation, and ask yourself, should we really doing the same thing? Like I would, there's been, the techniques and styles and sort inside of agility have evolved a lot. Sometimes for bad reason, just to kind of rebrand and sell another training course. And sometimes it was with good intention. Some have lasted the test of time and others haven't. And that should have been the beauty of agility, that it's constantly evolving to meet need and market. Somewhere along the way, and for me, if we play this, get back to like enterprise coaching, I think one of the things I think Agile coaching did wrong was it started to blend into life coaching.
Yeah.
And into adult development learning theory. Both have a place, but that means then when you're doing that, you're not listening to the wider system, you're focusing just in on that one person and how they feel. And Agile coaching was meant to be more than that. And I think there has been a bit of a bias to like NLP or some of these other aspects, which I'm not saying aren't valuable, but they're not the sweet spot of an enterprise agility coach. They're, we're meant to be thinking more systemically and at a higher heightened rate of failure rather than connection. I found executive coaching through techniques like Go, which are a little bit shorter and more transactional, was more of a complement to my agility than NLP, as an example. And I feel that I don't think as an Agile coach, asking somebody how do they feel 5 times in a row is the same as asking 5 whys.
No.
Right. And I think that was one place where I think we went a bit amiss in our discipline.
Yeah. And that I think keeps coming back to that notion of what's the toolbox, and when a person has that limited toolbox and they just keep trying to apply it to every single scenario they see, you get away with it some of the time, but it fundamentally can't create the shared value that we need to see in an organizational context.
Yeah, and I had I did an exec coaching course with ICL, I think it was called, and or IECL. Anyway, when I did it, one of the things that the trainer did is they told me off, and as if I'd already done something wrong. And what they said was, you've already failed as a coach, because there was a point in time in your coaching to date where you didn't read the signs of anxiety or depression and point a person in the right direction. You kept going. And I remember going, oh shit, I have no idea. Like, when I looked at they showed us the criteria of what you should be paying attention to for both, and I just said to myself, I've never considered any of this ever. Yeah. So, I probably did try and help somebody where I wasn't qualified to help. So, what I got out of that moment in time was realizing, like, there's a place and time for me to kind of let go and know what I shouldn't be doing. And it's actually probably been one of the biggest learnings that I've gained in the last 10 years is knowing when to talk to P&C, or knowing when not to challenge a person inside of a changing system because they're already struggling. Yeah. And I'm hired to kind of be a change agent, realizing when change creates anxiety, somebody else has to have something else has to happen before I can get involved.
Yeah.
And knowing when to step away is an important one, because those who do not wish to be coached can't be coached. And so especially with anxiety, someone really struggles to listen.
And I think that's really one of, in many ways, the most vital leadership lessons that I've heard for a while, is understanding your competency and sphere of influence. I think, you see that obviously quite large in the medical profession. They've got such heightened specializations. Yes, your obstetrician probably knows quite a bit about oncology, but they're going to go, well, hang on, that's not my specialization. I'll send you to an oncologist. I'm going to deal with obstetrics. That's my area. But I think in business, there's, particularly when you get to more senior leadership levels, there's this sense of, but I'm a Swiss Army knife. I could lead any team. I can get involved in anything. And it's sort of having that humility to go, actually, this isn't just a change management piece. There's actually a person here who does have clinical depression or PTSD. Yeah. And I should actually bring in a clinical psychologist to formally deal with that, rather than me trying to sort of coach them through the moment.
And now it's even heightened again, because, it's illegal not to.
Yeah.
Right. And the laws to support employees in the working environment meant that anybody, including us, should really check in with ourselves before putting anybody in that type of scenario, because we're to some extent, at least in Victoria, you're starting to break the law.
Yeah. And I think those legal frameworks are really very important, because I know certainly when boards think of governance, it always keeps coming back to, what does Fair Work say? What does the legislation say? And when it's in place, I think it really causes people to pause, whereas before they would have just crashed on. Now they do take that step back.
That's right. Yeah. I just did my my AICD training in January, and
lovely.
Safety and mental health were two key topics.
Yeah.
And they weren't brushed as kind of nice to haves. They were core. They were core to your duty of care.
Yeah.
To the organization.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And for me, special pleading on my part. My wife's a clinical psychologist, and is working in the in that sort of we're almost working out what to call it, the executive therapy space, someone who actually requires psychological treatment. And that's actually the blocker when it comes to, why aren't I achieving my strategic objectives? It's not just get up earlier in the morning, drink a litre of ice cold water. No, it's actually, in some cases, you might have childhood trauma, and that you're carrying through into your management of teams and your management of organizations and how you interact with the board. And once people can begin to unpack that and get it treated, I think it just helps them personally, as well as making for a better organization.
Well, for any form of coaching, counter-transference is an all day, everyday risk, where I remember transferring the bias I had to someone's name onto someone with the same name, and I was waiting. I was really waiting for him to say, "Oh, you're the exact same." And again, if I hadn't known what counter-transference was, I wouldn't have been able to check in on myself and kind of go, "This is just another person. You can't apply your past onto somebody else's answers." And that was a hard one to swallow. Yeah, I find there's coaching is such a, like, I am a coach. I assist businesses to transform their business. I can accelerate a restructure to a product emphasis. I can help with distribute the teams. And some of what I do is more instructional. Some of it is modeling. But behind everything that I do, the way that I ask questions and the way that I try to sustain value is coaching is required. you can't sustain value through direction and management.
No.
It's only through embedding and belief. So I'm kind of grateful that I found coaching in my career early in life. I started off as an athletics coach, and and I really loved it. Like, and I think my first training course in coaching was when I was 22. And because I've been like I was an athletics coach with a club, and we had some great days. Like, loved it, and then really embraced it, like absolutely embraced it. And then I think it was only when I was 32 I realized actually coaching, I couldn't make a job out of this, and I connected Agile and sports coaching together. That was how I created the career now that I've been doing for the last 20 years. Recently I've started to help the Australian Karate Association and their national squad training. And again, it's through coaching, but I'm not even a red belt in karate. I'm a jiu-jitsu guy. So how am I adding value in a room full of elite kumite fighters? It's through mindset adaptation to their circumstances, evolving by listening and evolving my tools and workshops to suit an environment that I'm not an expert in. One of the ways in which I've been giving feedback around how I'm adding value is because I ask openly, because I don't have a bias. I've never been a sensei, which most people are. Most of them own dojos and a way of running that business that then they start applying to national squad training, whereas I have none of that. So I just worry about national squad training, and that's added value of. So I find, like, even when you get your coaching mind in sync, I think you can adapt to circumstances so much better.
Yeah. And I think that adaptation and seeing, although the essentials are often the same, the context makes such a difference. I mean, I've often heard, particularly in football, or I guess soccer for more Australian audiences, the difference that people say between when you're playing at a club level, even at a very elite club level, versus playing in the national squad. Just the dynamics of the team, how they come together, the way they train together, how often they compete together, and just what it's like. It's still football, but it's just so different at the different levels and contexts.
I was a runner before I did jiu-jitsu, and I remember, I was good enough to make the national squad, and I remember going to my first national squad session, and now just they weren't going to be your friends. Some of them wanted to beat you, right? And whereas at a club, most club levels, like, we all kind of know our spots, and we know what I'm good at, what you're good at. I mean, especially at senior level at a club, you kind of know your stay in your lane type of thing. It's a bit different when you're in your teens. Some surpass others as they've had growth spurts and stuff like that. But like when you get to adult, stay in your lane. So there's a dynamic and a respect inside of club training, and you're also doing it every day, so it's somewhat habitual. You go to the national level, there's none of that, and even if I wanted to be people's friends, it's weird, with clubs, people usually gravitate eventually into a club that they like, people they like. With national squad training, you don't necessarily are training with people you even want to hang out with.
Yeah.
And I found that one really confronting, that, I'm part of a team with people I don't really want to hang out with.
Yeah. And that, I guess, sort of bringing it back to the organizational context, makes that establishment of psychological safety so difficult.
Absolutely.
When you come into a team and you sort of think, not only wouldn't I give this person house room, frankly, I would cross the street to avoid them, but now we're in a team, we've got to work together, and how that impacts the dynamics there.
And I have to say it. I reckon it took me 10 years to get this one right. I remember saying once to somebody, like when you're coaching, I have to coach everybody equally. Even if someone says, "Oh, you're gonna have to work with this person. Oh, they're horrible. They're nasty," I have to kind of say, "Well, they're a human being. There's, I'm coaching this person. My relationship and connection has got nothing to do with you. Can you kind of allow me to create what I need this to be?"
Yeah.
And getting to a point where I could coach someone I don't like, I had to have a belief that I think there's potential in everyone. That's my inner voice. Start up every single one. Even if I don't like the look of them, even if they say something mean to me at the beginning, even if they say something like, "I don't really want to be here," I have to start with that premise. And I went on a course once and a clinical psychologist told me, what you're saying is bullshit. That's not true. You don't like everyone. And I kind of went, what am I doing here? Am I doing the wrong thing? And it took me a while to figure it out that no, as a coach, I do have to take on the premise that I believe there's value in everyone and that everyone's coachable. That's what I start with. And they may not want me to coach them after half an hour, but like I have to begin with that. And that's you can select your friends. You can pick who you want to hang around with in a pub. You're a coach. The person in front of you is the most important person. How they got there is usually beyond your control. You got to make the most of it. And I think that has helped me to be a better manager, consultant, and coach, because I've had to, I suppose, create the social contracts to try and get the value out of every relationship.
And that is such a valuable leadership lesson, particularly as teams become ever more diverse. I mean, as you, I think, pointed out at the start of this this conversation, the heightened value that you get from very diverse teams. But of course, what that means is because not everyone's going to be like me, I'm not necessarily going to like everybody. But there really is that, and I guess is the distinction of the true professionals, how they will set aside. I was talking on another episode to Abdullah Rami, the CEO of Pablo and Rusty, and he was sort of saying, yes, when we come to work, we will often have political beliefs. We will have a lot of things that we believe in fundamentally, but it is always about, don't ignore them, but also, I guess, resist that temptation to let them to dominate the workspace, because at that point it's introducing friction rather than motivational values, which sometimes people say, look, I'm deeply motivated by my beliefs. Wonderful, but find the constructive way to leverage that rather than driving the negative aspects of the thinking.
And I have a proof point for this. So I fully agree with what you've just said. I have worked on some amazing teams, and I mean absolutely amazing teams with some great people. And I haven't spoken to them for 10 years. I often haven't spoken to them since COVID. It's because I don't have a personal relationship.
Yeah.
If I saw them in an office tomorrow, my ability to reminisce and think about the good days we've had together, no problem. I still probably won't be inviting them over for a barbecue. So yeah, we have to realize that the persona of ourselves inside of a working environment and inside of a team has a form of mutual respect and alignment to outcome. That doesn't mean that our core values can be the same. Like, how can I work with somebody who wants to vote? I was going to say green, but I don't mind green people. What's that? The crazy Queensland one?
Oh yeah, Or One
transparent.
Nation.
Yeah, One Nation. Yeah. So how can I work with a team with someone who wants to vote One Nation? I mean, I should be able to do that.
Yeah.
Otherwise I might because in my I still Maslow hierarchy needs, I need to earn a salary, so I will organize my emotions and the desire to be part of a team so that that's possible.
Yeah.
Otherwise, I'm going to have to work with a very small subset of the world, because I need to find someone who is probably more green in voting. That comes in a few ways for an Irishman. We would need to like Celtic football, and it'd be nice if they have a purple belt in jiu-jitsu or above, because white belts are a bit weird. They would need to have fallen in love with Charlene Spiteri of Texas, and they would need to like my spaghetti bolognese because I make the best one in the world. I'm gonna reach a point where there's only one person who's that, and that's me. Do I reach it? Do I become that fussy, or do I learn to respect diversity and appreciate the alternative perspectives? Help me.
Yeah.
And otherwise, how can I ever fit into an organization?
Absolutely. And in many ways, that's almost the great lesson from diversity. It's not about having a team so diverse that I can be accepted. It's actually about my capacity to accept the thinking and the beliefs and the approaches of other people, and then take the best elements of them. And, it all, for me, always reminds me of sort of polarity mapping. It's not a contest to be won. It's not a pure decision to be made. It's that there are these multifaceted elements, all of which we need to try and capture the upside without letting them become so pervasive that we just start to trigger all of the downside and then the negative aspects of it.
Yeah, and there was a very small, skinny book I read a while ago, and it really rocked me. It really was so profound. It was called On Dialogue by a man named David Boone, and in it he spoke about a couple of key concepts. One was shared understanding, and how can I reach a shared understanding with you? And required what he called open listening.
Yeah,
I have to truly listen to you and believe that I could learn something from you, Robert. Rather, what are you saying, and how can I manipulate it to suit myself?
Yeah,
because if that's the way that you listen, you will never create shared understanding. Shared understanding means that there's something that you can add to this conversation. Otherwise, it's not a conversation. It's direction.
And you see that so often in organizational environments where people are listening for their trigger. It's almost like they're listening for the starting gun for them to be able to put in their 5 cents or to justify their decision or to move on to the next topic.
Yeah, was it Roberts? Was it Skeen? Skeen called that downloading.
Yeah,
where just really downloading to find out where I want to and listen to the trigger so I can respond, which isn't listening. It's actually it was Theory U. That downloading, but nice.
Anyway, I thought we might wrap up, if you'll permit, with a bit of a lightning round. I'll fire off some questions. Feel free for one-word answers.
Looking forward.
Have a long download. Totally up to you.
Go for it.
First one is one agile practice you'd retain even if everything else disappeared.
Retrospective.
Nice. That's, I must admit, something that's not done well enough, I would argue, in a lot of settings.
I would 100% agree. And people repeat the same thing over and over again and expect a different result. So
Definition of insanity. One you'd abolish tomorrow.
Big room planning. I think it's become too mechanical. I think it's lost its value. I think it's lost its organic nature. It's become too prescriptive. So I probably need to rename it something else.
No, agreed. A book or thinker who most influenced your view of autonomy and work.
Um, Ralph Stacey, um, Beyond Uncertainty, I think it was called. And it's Ralph Stacey.
Oh, amazing. And final
Boundaries of Uncertainty, I think it may be.
Boundaries of Uncertainty. See if we can put a link in the show notes. And final one, what have you changed your mind about in the past 5 years?
That I need to be the person in the room who knows the most.
Fabulous. And so, just as we wrap up, please tell listeners where they can find and hear more from you.
Yeah, LinkedIn is probably my favorite tool of choice. So just check me out on LinkedIn. I've kind of gotten off a bit of the social media, mainly because of the social judges. I don't enjoy that form of judgment, but I hopefully will have published a book this year. So I'd love people to learn more about me by reading it. I don't have a name for it yet, so just.
I was about to say, when it comes out, send me a link, and I'll definitely make sure I update the show notes so people can make sure they find it.
Thanks, mate.
Martin Kearns, on the subject of leadership, thank you very much. Good night and good luck.
All the best.